Hi, everybody. I'm Brad Kelly, the regional coordinator for the Society of Biblical Literature's Pacific Coast region. And this is another installment of 7 Good Minutes, Meet Our Scholars. We think we've got some of the very best folks working in biblical studies out here in the Pacific Coast region. And this is a chance for us to just introduce some of our established and emerging scholars that we have. And so really happy to be joined today by Dr. Sarah Schectman. Sarah, thanks for doing this. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to do this.
Awesome. Well, 7 good minutes. Here we go. All right. Question number one is a kind of a vocational question. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing vocationally right now? Kind of the what and the how and the where and all that.
Well, one of the main things, really the main thing I do is work as an editor, a freelance copy editor. And most of my work is in Hebrew Bible, which is my area. That's where my degree is in. And I get a lot of my work through people I know through like SBL, through the guild, the general academic guild. And usually doing like editing articles or monographs that people are writing. It's usually individual scholars who contact me as opposed to presses or publishers asking me to do the editing, but it varies a little bit. So that's a big part of what I do, at least normally. Now, in the time of COVID, it's a little bit different, which I think I'll talk about. I'll have an opportunity to talk about later.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but that's the main, so sort of the main, paid work that I do. And then I also try to find time to keep up with my own scholarship and publishing, working on research, here and there, sort of as I can. I usually try to carve out some time in my schedule, a few weeks here or a few weeks there. Sometimes, if I know I'm going to be giving a paper at SBL or another conference, then I'll carve out the time before that to work on that research. Or other, if I've been invited to write something that's got a deadline, I carve out the time for that. So I try
Yeah.
to make time for my work, my research, in addition to the editing work.
So let me ask you about that. So the second
Mhm.
question is kind of about your own work. You mentioned Hebrew Bible. What do you
Mhm.
work on in your scholarship? Just sort of generally speaking.
It's mostly has to do with gender, women, although I've gotten more interested recently in masculinity. So it's not only about women, it's really about both men and women and how gender is constructed and in play for all people. And I mostly focus on texts in the Pentateuch. My primary interest right now is on Leviticus, is on the book of Leviticus and priestly understandings of gender. Um, and so that's where most of my work has been so far. Like my dissertation, which is my book, is on Pentateuch. It's just the area that's always really interested me a lot.
Very good. You mentioned this a little bit already, but the third question is kind of more specific. Is there a specific project that you've got going right now that's got you kind of excited or?
Yeah, there's a chapter I'm supposed to be writing that I haven't written yet, but on masculinities in the priestly materials, or on priestly constructions of masculinity, what those look like. That's the thing I should be researching and writing right now.
Very good, very good. Well, speaking of that kind of work, what, if anything, have you found exciting or maybe challenging about doing your work in the specific context of the Pacific Coast region, or in your case, Northern California?
Well, one of the things, because I'm an independent scholar, one of the challenges is library access when you don't have an institutional affiliation. And so one advantage of being in the Bay Area is that there is the Graduate Theological Union, which has a really good library that the public can join. And so you can use, like, I've been able to use that a lot. I moved out here while I was still writing my dissertation, and I was able to do that. And then there's UC Berkeley, and there's the Graduate Theological Union, all the separate institutions that are part of it, that you can sometimes get an affiliation through one of those. So I've had a couple of those here and there that can help you kind of feel like you're anchored to an institution. Although really I found ultimately that that's not necessary, because like there's access to the libraries, there's a lot more and more is available online. The public libraries also have pretty good resources. um, California, I mean, the Pacific Coast region in California, it's very sort of spread out. It feels much more diffuse as a region than, say, the New England region does, where like each school is, one right next to the other, basically, where it feels more densely populated in other areas, more so than it does here. And so on the one hand, that means that there's not the huge wealth of institutions nearby that you can try to sort of hook into for that sense of academic community. But there are still a lot of, like the public library here in San Francisco that then there's a consortium that it's part of that you can basically get any book you need that way. So they're because of sort of, I think, the progressive nature of California in various ways, and much of the other states in the Pacific Coast region as well. I think there's still that sense of community, even though we're really spread out from one another.
Very good. Well, last question. We'll get you out of here on this one. And it's a tougher one. These are obviously challenging times with the COVID-19 pandemic and racial and social injustice and Black Lives Matter and more.
Mhm.
Just any thoughts on being a biblical scholar in the time and context where we find ourselves right now?
Well, it's really, I mean, I think I think probably people in every discipline say, like, now more than ever, it's the importance of our discipline is apparent. It's so readily apparent. But I do think that there's a lot, the fact that evangelical voices are so prominent in the public discourse right now. And I see it's not something I do that much of, but I see a lot of people in our field who are really trying to engage and have a voice in that debate and offer insights and maybe correctives here and there, and try to do something that's really positive and a force for positive change, given the way that religion, the place that religion and biblical texts have in the public discourse right now. I mean, they always have in the US, I think, but right now, like, there's so much at stake. And it's not just like politically there's a lot at stake, but also that, in academia, there's a lot at stake right now. Like, there are so few jobs for so many candidates for them, all of whom are deserving of these positions. It feels very much to me like so much is at risk right now, from the top all the way down to the bottom. And I hope at least that educating people and talking to people and speaking about these matters that really seem critically important will have some kind of positive effect. And so in that way, I think it's really an important time to be, not just to be a biblical scholar, but to be a vocal and engaged biblical scholar.
Well, you certainly are one, and I appreciate that. And thanks for taking the time to do this. And so, everybody, that's 7 Good Minutes with Dr. Sarah Schectman, and we hope to see you on here for the next one. Thanks, everybody.